Jaws is widely considered one of the best thrillers ever made, but it almost never happened at all. From budget problems to cast feuds and Oscar snubs, we're diving deep into the waters of a movie that started with notorious production problems but finished with rave reviews, 3 Academy Awards, and a whole bunch of cash. Here's the untold truth of Jaws. Unfinished script. One of the early signs that production on Jaws wouldn't run as smoothly as planned came from the script, which passed through the hands of 3 writers: Jaws novelist Peter Benchley, playwright Howard Sackler, and comedy writer Cole Gottlieb. Gottlieb told the Los Angeles Times in 2015, Benchley was a journalist who didn't understand screenplays. Sackler did a workmanlike job of translating the novel faithfully. A faithful rendition of the novel was not what was needed. Something else was needed, and I came on board. Gottlieb wound up removing a number of subplots from Benchley's novel and adding a dose of humor to the script, ultimately creating the story that made it on screen. Broken Shark. Choosing to film out in the ocean and not in a Hollywood studio tank created a number of headaches for the cast and crew. However, few things were more frustrating and costly than the film's mechanical shark. According to Mental Floss, the shark sank to the bottom of the Nantucket Sound on its first day of shooting.
And you could hear basically every day you could hear this. The shark is not working.
The fishy villain, nicknamed Bruce on set, continued to malfunction, forcing Steven Spielberg and his team to figure out how to film most of the movie without the shark. And as it turned out, the shark-free approach worked, and Spielberg later admitted that had the shark been working, perhaps the film would have made half the money and been half as scary. Production woes. Between mechanical sharks sinking to the bottom of the ocean and boats flooding mid-scene, Jaws' seemingly endless production woes ate into the film's production schedule and budget, to the point where some members of the cast, crew, and executive team thought the movie would ruin their careers.
I mean, the studio was running out of patience, there's no question about it, and things were, the atmosphere was getting a little tense.
According to BuzzFeed, Jaws started with a budget of $3.5 million and a 55-day production schedule, but ultimately cost about $9 million and took over 159 days to complete. To this day, this production haunts Spielberg, who said, 100 days over schedule, or the water, it was insane. I almost got fired probably 19 times. It was almost my epilogue, He made Jaws. Of course, Jaws became the highest-grossing movie of 1975, and remains one of the most financially successful movies of all time, but nobody knew that back then. Actor feud. Much like the characters they played, actors Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss did not get along during much of the shooting of Jaws. What caused the feud? According to co-star Roy Scheider, Shaw initially took issue with Dreyfuss's pompous attitude about filming a movie. Scheider recalled in the Biography Channel documentary Jaws: The Inside Story, Shaw really thought Dreyfuss needed a slapping down, that he was a young punk with no stage experience. Things only got worse from there. Their feud reached a boiling point when Dreyfuss threw a glass of bourbon that Shaw had been drinking out the window. Spielberg remembers that moment well.
That was the shot heard around the world.
The duo eventually made amends during the filming of Quint's famous USS Indianapolis speech, again much like their characters. And speaking of that scene, drunk on set. One of the key turning points in Jaws comes when Shaw's character Quint delivers a harrowing monologue about the time he battled tiger sharks in the water after the USS Indianapolis was torpedoed by the Japanese Navy.
I don't know how many sharks, maybe 1,000. I don't know how many men, they average 6 an hour.
But actually, filming the iconic moment wasn't exactly easy, because Shaw was too drunk to say his lines. Spielberg told Ain't It Cool News,
I guess he had more than a few drinks because the 2 crew members actually had to carry him onto the Orca and help him into his chair. And I had 2 cameras on the scene, and we never got through the scene. He was just too far gone.
Iconic ad-lib. Although Quint's speech remains one of the great movie monologues of all times, it inevitably pales in comparison to Jaws' most iconic line.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
According to screenwriter Cole Gottlieb, the line was a running joke on set because everybody thought the barge carrying the production's lighting, camera equipment, and craft services was too small. Richard Zanuck and David Brown were very stingy producers, so everyone kept telling them, "You're gonna need a bigger boat." It became a catchphrase for any time anything went wrong. If lunch was late or the swells were rocking the camera, someone would say, "You're gonna need a bigger boat." Gottlieb added that Scheider liked to ad-lib the line at various points during production, including the now famous scene. No sequel for Spielberg. After Jaws went on to make a boatload of money, the inevitable sequel talk came into play. By that point, however, Spielberg was done with the franchise. He told Ain't It Cool News, "I was done. I was done with the ocean. I would have done the sequel if I hadn't had such a horrible time at sea on the first film." Still, that doesn't mean he hasn't revisited the story on occasion. He added, "I have a very, very good scene which I thought would have been good for a sequel someday. Every time I think of this scene, I think, could this be another Jaws movie? And I have to immediately pull myself back down to earth." Oscar snub. When award seasons rolled around after Jaws' release, Spielberg was so convinced that he was going to be nominated for an Oscar that he hired a camera crew to film him watching the nominations on television.
Jaws is about to be nominated in 11 categories. You're about to see us sweep the nominations.
Turns out Spielberg was a little too optimistic. The film wound up receiving only 4 nominations, and although it went on to win 3, Spielberg was upset that he wasn't nominated for Best Director for Jaws, calling the decision commercial backlash.
When a film makes a lot of money, people resent it. Everybody loves a winner.
That may be true, but nobody loves a sore loser either. Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.